My name is Jarory De Jesus. I am talking to you today about some industry stuff. I'm assuming everyone here is in the game dev program, or at least is interested in it, correct? Fantastic. A couple of preliminary announcements before I get started, things I have to say for legal reasons. All the views described in this PowerPoint presentation are mine and mine alone. They do not belong to any of the companies that I'll be talking about. I am not representing any of the companies here today. I am employed by one of them at the moment. However, these companies are their own entities. They are separate from mine. They have nothing to do with this presentation. Get the legal stuff out of the way. So as I said, my name is Jarory De Jesus. I am what's called a technical designer. Does anyone know what that is? Cool. We're going to get into what that is then. I saw no hands go up. A little bit about myself before we get started. These are my credentials, I guess. I have a bachelor's in anthropology from the University of Southern Florida, for Bulls, with a minor in creative writing. I have a master's in game development from the Florida Interactive Entertainment Academy at UCF, which is a mouthful to say. It's a master's degree program for video games. If you're interested in learning more about it, come talk to me after the presentation. I've worked for Universal Studios, Electronic Arts, and currently employed by Scientific Games. I have 2 ship titles under my belt. The first one, I'll show you for both of those, but they're listed here. So this one is a little more obscure. This is an indie title. It was my first ship title. We shipped it to Steam last December.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Unfortunately.
Listen, dummy. I've been captured by the hi-hat of the Big Hat Wizards. I need you to come here and rescue me.
That sounds like a personal problem.
Scam!
What's the worst that could happen? Oh, the humanity!
The Big Hat mines. There's a sealed door between us. You'll need to find gems that power it.
You know, this cave is pretty. Too pretty for these big hat clowns.
Yes, it's pretty. But it would be prettier if I wasn't trapped in here.
In case you've forgotten, I'm rescuing you. So shush! Let me do my thing.
So this game was produced while starting my master's over at FIA. We went on afterwards to complete it and actually ship it to Steam. This other title maybe one you guys are a little more familiar with. This is actually the mode I worked on. It's called Face of the Franchise. It's a custom player creation mode where you then go through a mini storyline, which we called the prologue at the time, and you're kicked off into a franchise. In this mode, you'll get text message updates from coaches, players, and challenges, little mini missions and such. And I worked on many of the features that go into that program, particularly the text messaging system. If you're really interested in dialogue and narrative design, in the first title, I worked on the entire script and the dialogue systems that were in the game, so I can talk to you at length about that if you want to learn more. So back to PowerPoint. Yep, so those are my titles. A couple notes on the person I am not. So, like everything, you take everything with a grain of salt. I am not a professor. I don't have a background in education, so if there are something the professor tells you seems more true to what you believe, I would take their guidance. I'm not an artist. I'm a technical designer. I specialize in design and programming. Art questions, say for someone else, I'm not going to be able to answer them. And I'm not Jar Jar Binks. My name is Jarory. Someone once called me Jar Jar Binks, and that was not a good time for them. So let's dive right into it. What is a technical designer? The long story short of this is they are a creative and a programmer fused into a single entity. Their job is to pick up the tracks and pick up the pieces, fill in the gaps. They serve as a bridge between the design team and the programming team. Oftentimes they're responsible for knowing how to talk code, or be able to code themselves, and know how to talk design, or be able to design themselves. Responsibilities cover a wide range of options, and I have a list here. I'm just going to list them out. You're responsible for idea generation, prototyping, level design, scripting, communication, education, feature implementation, cinematics, animation, audio engineering, narrative design, and much more. Sometimes you're responsible for developing small feature sets. So for example, on Madden, I was responsible for ownership of what we called the, wow, I just blanked on the name for a second, I'm sorry about that. What we called the scenario engine. Basically, the text message scenarios that you would get in-game, I was responsible for the pipeline tools that enable us to have that. And so you'll basically be responsible for everything. However, if you're snickering, you kind of already know that you can't do everything. In fact, that's one of the Achilles heels of this role. It's a double-edged sword, and there's no way to master everything. And in fact, if you try to, and you put it on your resume, you will get rejected from jobs for being too much of a generalist, is usually the term they'll say. They won't, or they'll say they won't with someone else, usually they won't actually give you feedback. But the general idea is if you spread yourself too thin and don't have a specialization when applying for jobs in the games industry, even in this kind of capacity, you are going to struggle. So what are a couple rows here? These are some titles on how to solve this problem. Effectively, these are different positions that a technical designer can fill. And the problem with this role is that there's no agreed upon outlines as far as what we do or how to market us. So these are other positions that technical designers are responsible for, and oftentimes will be seen doing the same things just by a different name in another company. And I really have this corny little animation guide. I'm again an artist and an animator, so please bear with me on these. So we'll go through the list of the different names, starting with encounter designers. Basically, this role is responsible for creating frameworks. You're really kind of scripting heavy, and you're making micro encounters. Who here's played Spider-Man for the PS4? Okay, you know when you're swinging through the city and you stumble upon a single isolated event? That is what an encounter designer does. They script those events, they lay them out. They usually aren't responsible for generating the assets or even telling a story there, but they will make these engaging. Another level higher than that is going to be the mission designer. Basically, they're creating longer segments of game. So if you play Horizon Zero Dawn, Assassin's Creed, any of these really big open world games, they employ mission designers to craft these specialized sequences. You're often going to see a mission designer responsible for a little bit of story, a little bit of scripting, and communication is vital in this role, because even though you're going to be owning the mission, you will be communicating with art, narrative, design, programming. You're not doing it all by yourself, and that's a really important thing to remember here. Going a little higher than that, well, I don't want to say higher, just kind of a little more complicated, is the quest designer. They're very similar to the mission designer, but oftentimes quests can span multiple missions. These are utilized primarily in the MMO and RPG market. So if you've ever played any MMO, you're given a quest that has multiple stages. Usually you're responsible here for the lore, making sure the lore you come up with fits into the overall narrative of the game. And you're also responsible for scripting. And you're going to hear me say this a lot. For those of you who are kind of newer to gaming, when I say scripting, I do not mean writing. I mean writing code. Scripting languages such as C#, Python, JavaScript. These are slightly different than lower level languages such as C, C++, which are hardcore programming languages. Scripting languages are lighter, easier to use, and oftentimes are not focused on things such as memory management. And that's one of the key differences there. Going kind of a little bit in a different direction from there. Let's see, I don't have the sequence I put this in, so it might overlap, and I'm sorry about that. Maybe it's this one next. Nope. Whoops. Oh well. So you can't read the text there, and I apologize for that. There is the systems designer position. This position is entirely different than the ones I described so far. You'll see these employed in MOBAs, RPGs, and particularly any competitive game, because systems designers are responsible for balance. They work a lot in spreadsheets, tweaking numbers, so whenever you're like, oh man, this character is so overpowered, this is the person behind that. And they're often not aware that they're overpowered at the time. They're doing their best to balance the game. And when you have that many moving factors, for instance, Overwatch, any character's reload speed, movement speed, accuracy, the rate of their bullets, recharge rate of their specials. There's so many moving parts. It's an art form, honestly. And so this role is really critical. The technical designer can fill this role because they're often math-based, and they have some light scripting, usually to implement the things they're balancing, but they're really focused on the numbers. Moving over a little bit more, that was the one that's supposed to be next. The narrative designer. This one is a really confusing role for a lot of people. It's not a writing role, and that's really important to know. A narrative designer is responsible for crafting the world and laying down what we call the pillars for which the writers will run with. You're also responsible for tools. That's why I have a little tool stick over there. You often will implement ways for the writer to get their dialogue into the game engine in a way that requires the minimum amount of effort. This was my job at EA. I did some light writing, and this role will include some writing, but oftentimes it is not a writing role. So while at EA, I built a pipeline tool that allowed us to read JSON. For those of you who don't know what it is, it's like just kind of blocks of information and data. And we would read that data and then generate scenes based on that data at the push of a button, and allow the script writers to write their entire script out, push a button, and now it was in the game. It's really powerful stuff that a narrative designer can do. Next up, we have, it's going to be messed up the whole time, and I'm really sorry about that. Let's see if we can fix it. Yeah, there we go. All right, go back to see. All right, clicked it. Never mind, it's messed up. Next up is the technical level designer. Who here aspires to be a level designer? Cool. All right, we've got one person. I see one. A technical level designer works very closely with what they call a level artist. Oftentimes, they're responsible for not designing the level, but making the level pop, making the pieces move, the platforms, the fireworks, everything that happens in the level that is active and requires scripting. This is what the technical level designer is going to be responsible for. There's a couple other roles up here that I really don't have the ability to animate properly anymore, so I'm just going to go into them one at a time. There's the cinematics responsibility. This is not a title. This is a responsibility you'll get in these other roles. For instance, in the narrative designer or mission or quest designer role, you'll also be responsible for scripting cinematics. So if you've seen the Uncharted series and those like cinematic sequences, you're not responsible for designing them or crafting them, but rather writing the code behind them so that they execute in the right flow, so quick time events, things like that. UI is another role in which the technical designer can find a lot of fulfillment. Basically, if you're playing a mobile title or even a first-person shooter, you need UI, and oftentimes this UI is active and engaging. Mobile titles in particular will utilize this role heavily, but other titles, from God of War to Halo, will also utilize the UI designer, or UI engineer is usually what it's actually called. The designer is actually responsible for creating the icons. The engineer is the one responsible for putting it into the world. And I think that's it. Oh, one more. Unity developer is a special role for the technical designer. It's kind of a fallback role. It's an all-encompassing role. The problem with this title is that it covers everything and varies from company to company. So some companies have a Unity developer, you are solely a software engineer, all you do is code. Some companies hire a Unity developer, you're also a gameplay designer. And you really need to read job descriptions very closely when applying as a Unity developer. And the main takeaway I want you guys to take out of this is the technical designer is a versatile role. They can cover all of these. You should not cover all of these. In fact, you should pick like 2. Find the one you really, really enjoy doing and specialize in that. Those roles are where you're going to find your way to success and build your portfolio around the thing you want to do. If you want to focus on AI, for instance, as a technical designer, because you want to be a mission designer and there's some AI to implement there. Design missions. Sorry, you're fine. Design missions, programming AI, show off the work you can do. I'm kind of at the end of my PowerPoint, surprisingly. That went faster than I thought. I'm open to questions, answers, so feel free to ask away. Go ahead.
What's it like?
Sorry, what's your name?
Brandon.
Brandon, what can I do for you?
What's it like working in NJIT? I hear that the work conditions are ideal from some of the previous reports.
Sure. EA was like a normal company, honestly. It was, so prior to getting into game development, I was a software engineer for a company called ConnectWise, and even before that, a company called Electronic Data. It was the same thing. ConnectWise was slightly better because they had a bunch of free food, which is the only reason I really liked it. But EA was just a company. The conditions, there are crunch time conditions at EA, and they're usually scheduled. So, for instance, while we were working on this feature in April, March-ish, it got really noticeable that we were not going to meet our date on time. So instead of working 40 hours a week, we were working like 50, 55. And we got paid overtime. They would cater dinner every night that we worked overtime. So they made sure to take care of us, but we were working extra hours. And I liked money, it was good money, I had no complaints. Any other questions? I see 2 over here, 1 in the back.
My name is Jeff. My question is, when you first started your project for your master's, or when you did the Madden, what were your expectations that you were going to do, and what did you actually end up doing for those?
Okay, this is a 2-part answer then. For Madden, my expectations were a lot more clear than they were on Scam. While working on Madden, I was told you were going to be implementing a lot of dialogue, you were going to be implementing a lot of features. This is more tech-heavy than design role. Are you comfortable with that? Sure. Even in the interview process, they gave me 2 tests. The first was a design test, the second was a technical test. And the design test, they were like, about, but the technical test is where they were really concerned because it was an implementable role. So I went in on Madden expecting to do what I did, which was a lot of scripting. Scam was a different story. Initially, my role as spelled out on paper was the development director. I was responsible for managing pipelines, schedules, and such. I was effectively a producer. However, I stuck my neck out and I said, I love story, I want to be responsible for the story of the project. He was like, sure, we have no one to do it, run away with it. So I crafted the world, I wrote the dialogue, I built the systems to put the dialogue in engine, and had I not done that, the game wouldn't have had a story. I was also responsible for coding in C++ for some segments of the game. You can change the character's skin to like a different color. I built that system, and a couple other features. The main character you saw can teleport. I did the basic implementation for that before handing it off. So I did a lot of things I wasn't prepared to do on Scam and had to learn on the fly. And I think one of the best things about being a technical designer and getting training in that role is that's what you learn to do. You learn to adapt. You learn how to learn the things you don't know. And that's a really vital skill. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool. You raise your hand, I'm sorry.
How do you deal with deadlines and making sure everything is on schedule?
First part is practice. Initially, when we were working on Scam, we had deadlines. For those of you who are in the program or more familiar with it, like you guys have your deadlines and such, and they're expected in the part of your grade. We have very much the same thing. We had milestones once a month. We had to give a status update and have these things ready. Initially, we were struggling, right? We didn't know how to manage our deadlines. And I'm the one at fault here because I'm responsible for the schedule of the game. So with practice, you start learning your own capability, and you start being able to tell people, I can deliver this in the next 2 weeks. So using an agile methodology for managing yourself and your team, I don't know if you guys are familiar with what that term is, but effectively you use what are called sprints. So every 2 weeks you'll meet with the team, or at least the team leads will meet. You'll decide what needs to be done in that time span, and then give out marching orders. And then anything that can't be done gets rolled over into the next week, and because you have now cut into next week's time, you have to readjust the scope. And this is the most critical part of managing your deadlines is scope. Oftentimes, when people start making games, they have these grandiose ideas of what they want them to be. I guarantee you, in the process of making a game, you will cut that in half. And then you will cut in half again, and again, until you're left with a fraction of what you thought the game was going to be. The best way to counter this is to start small. Instead of scoping for a larger game, scope for a small piece. We did this with Scamp after the first pass. We just focused on one small puzzle. And from there we added another, and then another, and another. Eventually we built 4 levels with full puzzles over the course of a year. But at each month milestone, we had a game we were proud to ship, even if it was only 20 minutes long. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
No problem. Anyone else?
Kind of in the same vein, what do your deadlines look like for these different games?
Sure. Both games have a really strict deadlines. So on Scamp, as part of the master's degree program, your deadline is graduation, which means if you're not done, get fucked. There's really no way to say that. And likewise for EA, your deadline is the shipping date that the marketing department has already announced, which means we're not pushing it back. And EA was even harder because we have to print discs, which means the due date is a month ahead of the shipping date because we have to get it in, finalized. And it's actually earlier than that because we're working with PlayStation and Xbox. And they have strict requirements that have to be met before they'll approve any game on their platform. And if you don't meet those requirements, you have to go back, fix the bugs they tell you to fix, and try again. That process is a couple weeks long. So if we shipped the game in August with Madden, we had to be done with the game in June. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, but then like when did you start?
So there are different phases of the game. Pre-production is the starting phase. It's where you're kind of theory crafting, throwing out ideas, spitballing, trying to narrow down what you actually want to do with the game. That started for Scamp December of 2017. In EA, that started before I had even become employed there. So about a year ahead of the launch date, or more than that. I would say that maybe the May before the year, so a year and a couple months. Then you move into production, which is where you do all the coding and everything. For Scamp, this lasted from about January to, I want to say May. For EA, this went from December, when I started, till about April. After production, you move into what's called alpha. During alpha, you are not adding new content to the game. This is critical. You are improving things. You are fixing bugs. You are squashing all the bugs you can. EA is very stringent about this. They have it's called Jira, and it's a tracking software, and it just has thousands of bugs. And you go into Jira and say, I can fix that one. And you take it, you fix it. And it's kind of a free-for-all. You know your domain, so if someone knows, like for me, I was working on the narrative features, they would pump the bugs over to me, and I was responsible for those bugs. Following alpha, you go into beta, which is where you open it up to a closed kind of test public. So you're really not adding anything new, and you're tightening only the most critical bugs that aren't going to break things, and then you ship it. Does that kind of give you an idea of how that process works?
Yeah.
Cool.
What would you say is like the longest part of the process?
Production. Yeah, bar none, production. You spend the most time in production. Depending on the game, it could be pre-production if you're designing and like have the idea in your head for a couple of years before you start working on it. But like that's semantics at that point.
So you say that part of being a technical designer is bridging between programming and design.
Yes.
Do you have any examples of that?
Sure. While working on SCAMP, I often had to be the person to tell our lead designer that's not technically feasible, which is not a fun position to be in. I don't like being the no guy. Are we good on time?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. I don't like being the no guy, but oftentimes I learned to, instead of saying no, to be like, okay, that task that feature you want will take this amount of hours to implement. Do you want to proceed? Or on the programming side, a lot of times it's explaining design ideas in technical terms that make sense. So when working on narrative features, or for instance, I had someone working who kind of helped me edit the script, and he wanted to add a sequence in which Scamp, the main character, knocked the book off the shelf and said, "Take that reading." Then the master would make a joke, and he would say something like, "I hate the books, isn't that what you do?" And it was supposed to be funny. The issue is, and this is where being the guy who was editing is pure design, and the programmer is pure programming, and I kind of bridge the gap here, where being like, that's going to require these animations. I'll have to sequence and script each one of those, and it'll cost us this much. And that's a lot of what the technical designer does by bridging those two gaps. So I can tell the programmer we'll need to make an interface that allows us to very easily add sequences or add dialogue. And I had to tell the designer, hey, what you're asking for is going to require these resources. And that's sort of where you bridge those gaps.
When looking for EA, how do you like your team, I guess, would be for like whatever you have to do?
Sure. So the Madden team as a whole, the building was about 600 people. The building included Madden and NBA. This is the Tiburon office in Orlando, for those of you who are keeping track. The Madden team is about 200 people. However, they're kind of sectioned and siloed, so our little silo for narrative was about a dozen.
Okay.
Anyone else? No?
So what kind of skills do you need when it comes to bridging communication from different teams that are working on different
Sure. Know to code is my first statement, and even if it's a soft scripting language like C#, Python, or JavaScript, I would recommend C#. It's the closest to other hardcore languages out of the 3 scripting languages that I just mentioned. Lua is another one, but I still would recommend C#. It also is the language of choice for Unity, so if you know C#, you'll be able to develop in Unity. You'll also need to know design principles. Specifically, you'll need to know best practices in game design. This is more of an art than it is a science, and it's really important to remember that. Your ideas are not the best ideas. Oftentimes, they're the worst ideas. It just be like that sometimes. But knowing how to design a game from scratch. Oftentimes, as a technical designer, I encourage people to build their own games and then play it. And then have other people play it. And do other people understand it and think it's fun? And oftentimes this comes down to design choices, not programming. And so once you have those 2 things in your pocket, you can understand what it takes to design a good game and what it takes to build that design. And that's how you serve as that bridge. Sure.
So, how different was it going from school then straight into industry?
It wasn't. Honestly, FIA does a really good job of preparing you for the industry. It helps that EA hires a lot of people directly out of FIA to the point where my colleague who worked with me on Scamp referred to EA as FIA 2.0. So by the time I was in the industry, I felt like it was the same thing, just scale bigger. It's a matter of, scale, I would say. I see 2 hands over here, we'll go with purple shirt. First sweater.
Okay. So I was wondering, like you said that you had to learn a lot of things on the fly, right?
Mhm.
What would be, like if you could go back in time, what would be one skill that you want to like teach yourself before you got the job?
Sure. So probably the number one thing I wish I knew better, this one's really silly, is math. My math skills are lacking somewhat, and it really showed when trying to do some gameplay programming on Scamp. And I wish I could teach myself that better, but also, this is less of a skill and more of a paradigm of thinking. And that's, while working at Universal, someone gave me the best advice I've ever gotten as a programmer, which is don't think of it as a programming problem. Try to solve the solution with that code. And I wish I knew that a lot earlier, because I would have approached things very differently.
Thank you.
No problem. And then over here.
What would one do to become a digital designer, like now, like while still in university?
As a technical designer, I think, so I've looked at some of the classes you guys are taking, really focus, your program seems very code heavy, so I think picking up books on design principles, particularly like the roles I laid out here earlier, like finding which of these niches you want to be in and reading job descriptions, and then take those skills. Whatever they list, do that. For instance, Quest designer at CD Projekt Red, I've applied for this role before, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. They want you to know how to use RedKit, which is their modding and their tool that they let people build in. So go build a level in RedKit, or mod something in RedKit. Once you read the job descriptions for what companies are looking for, you'll have a better idea of what skills you need, and you can work on those.
Okay, alright, thank you.
No problem. Alright, I got probably 2 more questions of me before I'm like exhausted, so hit me. Alright, here we go, let's go again.
How is the dynamic when it comes to working with teams or leading a team in a professional setting?
That is a loaded question, but I'll give this a shot. Have you ever tried to organize your friends to go anywhere?
Oh.
It's the same thing, you're just being paid to do it now. The real difference, I think, between the people's perception of being a lead and what actually leading a team is like, is at the end of the day, we're all just people, and we all just want to be validated and feel like we're doing a good job. So treating your fellow coworkers or colleagues as equal to you, if not more knowledgeable, because often they are in whatever their specialization is, and trusting them is the real big key to being a good lead in that dynamic. At the same time, you have to know when you need to put your foot down on something. A good example of this was our lead designer on Scamp was very uncertain, and so he would sometimes doubt himself, and a lot of times it caused schedule delays. And so I had to go to him and be like, hey, you made up your mind on this once, we're not changing it, I'm sorry. And that can sometimes lead to conflict, and knowing how to handle conflict resolution, knowing how to handle conflicts and resolve them without provoking the other person is a critical skill to have, not just for a lead, but anyone in this industry. It's a very small industry. You make a name for yourself as an asshole, you're not getting a job. All right, one more.
So you said that for being a technical designer, there's usually 2 little niches that people should focus on. So what were your 2?
Narrative, for sure, and scripting.
Okay.
My writing background, I really wanted to do something with that, so I focused heavily on narrative. And as a self-taught coder, because before going to university, between finishing my bachelor's and starting my master's, I taught myself how to code. I really loved doing it, and I wanted to bridge those two together.
Thank you.
Well, thank you guys so much for attending. If you guys want to talk to me afterwards and come up to me and chat, I'm more than open, but I won't keep people here hostage for other questions unless you guys want to. So, thank you guys.